Canada and Portugal have ditched the F-35, delivering a humiliating blow to Washington's military grip. For decades, the U.S. has forced allies into overpriced, unreliable weapon deals, but now even NATO members are pushing back. This isn't just a contract cancellation, it's a rebellion. Is America losing its ironclad control over global defense? Canada and Portugal sought independence from U.S. military influence. In a surprising development, Canada and Portugal have both canceled their plans to buy the F-35, the next-generation stealth fighter manufactured by Lockheed Martin. This decision is more than just the usual cancellation of contracts. It is a clear signal that the world is moving away from its traditional dependence on the United States. For decades, Washington has used its military-industrial complex to make allies dependent on American weapons, but now even NATO members are starting to fight back. Canada and Portugal's rejection of the F-35 underscores a broader global trend, the search for military autonomy and toward alternatives unconstrained by American political constraints. Canada cancels the F-35 deal, a slap in the face for Washington. Ottawa's decision to scrap its $19 billion contract for 88 F-35s is a humiliating blow to Washington's global arms dominance. Canada was an early and committed partner in the Joint Strike Fighter (JSF) program, making its withdrawal a symbolic rejection of U.S. leadership. So, why did Canada walk away from a deal once seen as a strategic necessity? The answer is clear: Donald Trump. Trump's erratic foreign policy, trade disputes, and constant attacks on allies have shattered confidence in U.S. defense commitments. His administration's America First doctrine alienated partners, treating even close allies like adversaries. Canada, already frustrated by Trump's tariffs on aluminum and steel, saw little reason to tie itself to a weapons program mired in cost overruns, delays, and political chaos. By abandoning the F-35, Canada isn't just making a financial decision, it is making a statement. The world no longer trusts Washington's leadership under Trump, and even America's closest allies are looking elsewhere. Economic warfare against Canada. Under Trump's chaotic and ego-driven trade policies, Canada has found itself increasingly under economic attack from its supposedly closest ally. The former president's reckless obsession with America First led to a series of powerful tariffs and trade barriers against Canada, targeting industries such as steel, aluminum, and autos. In February 2025, the Trump administration escalated tensions further by imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, crippling several key sectors of the Canadian economy. This is not just an economic dispute, but also a public statement that the United States no longer sees Canada as a partner, but as just another target in its self-destructive trade war. Naturally, Ottawa responded in kind. On March 12, 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney responded with retaliatory tariffs on $21 billion worth of American goods, sending a clear message: Canada will no longer tolerate economic bullying. At this point, it became clear to Canadian policymakers that over-reliance on American military hardware was no longer sustainable. Why should Canada invest billions of dollars in American-made jets while at the same time being viewed as an economic rival? The F-35 deal suddenly became politically toxic. F-35 financial black hole with strings attached? In addition to economic tensions, the decision to cancel the F-35 contract was also motivated by the aircraft's high costs and persistent technical errors. The F-35 has long been criticized as a maintenance nightmare, with sky-high operating costs making it one of the most expensive fighter jets in history. An F-35 costs approximately $90 million, but the real financial burden comes from its maintenance, which is estimated at $44,000 per flight hour, much higher than alternative fighters. Furthermore, the F-35 program comes with significant U.S. control over its operational use. The plane's software is closely guarded by Lockheed Martin and the U.S. government, meaning that even after purchase, Canada remains dependent on Washington for software updates, maintenance, and logistical support. This effectively turns the F-35 into a rental fighter, instead of an asset under full Canadian control. Given Trump's erratic behavior and willingness to support powerful allies, the idea of relying on the U.S. for critical military infrastructure has become extremely appealing. Canada's alternative: escaping dependence on the United States. Rather than sink deeper into dependence on Washington, Canada has chosen to explore alternative fighter jets, ones that offer financial sustainability and the ability to operate more independently. The leading candidate is will-received JAS 39 Gripen. The Swedish-designed multi-role fighter has received international acclaim for its high-flying performance. significantly lower operating costs, and, most importantly, its flexibility in terms of national control. Unlike the F-35, which requires constant U.S. surveillance, the Gripen allows for complete technological sovereignty. In addition to evaluating the Gripen, Canada is also seeking stronger defense partnerships with European countries. By expanding military cooperation within NATO but reducing dependence on the United States, Canada is signaling a fundamental change, no longer just a junior partner following Washington's lead, but an independent power capable of making its own strategic decisions. Portugal rejects F-35, another crack in U.S. influence. After Canada's move, Portugal also announced its withdrawal from the F-35 program. The Portuguese government cited growing concerns about U.S. political instability and a lack of long-term credibility in Washington's commitments. The reality is clear. Under Trump, the United States has become an unpredictable ally, one more concerned with short-term interests than maintaining stable alliances. For Portugal, as well as many European countries, the need for a more autonomous defense strategy is growing. With European nations collectively increasing their defense budgets and expanding projects such as the European Defense Fund, (EF) and Permanent Structured Cooperation, (PESCO), the continent is gradually moving toward greater military independence from Washington. Canada's broader strategic shift towards Europe. Canada's rejection of the F-35 is part of the plan for greater realignment in both economic and military policy. Frustrated by Washington's hostility, Canada has actively strengthened economic and defense ties with Europe. Strengthen economic relations with the EU. During the past 6 years, Canada's trade with the European Union has increased by 50%, with growing cooperation in the fields of energy, technology, and defense production. By prioritizing Europe over the United States, Canada is ensuring that it has a strong and diversified economic strategy, one that does not leave it vulnerable to the whims of a short-sighted and protectionist American president. Strengthen military cooperation with NATO and Europe. In addition to trade, Canada is also expanding its role in NATO, particularly through its participation in the Agreement Enhanced Forward Presence, EFP, in Latvia, and its participation in the EU Defence Initiative. In a major symbolic move, Canada has officially joined PEACH, the EU's military cooperation framework, signals readiness to strengthen defense integration with Europe. This is not just a short-term pivot, but also a long-term strategy to escape excessive dependence on Washington. And with Trump's reckless approach to foreign policy, it's a strategy that's becoming more and more urgent. 4. Trump's self-destructive foreign policy pushing back allies. As Trump continues his erratic and isolationist policies, America is losing the very alliances that have held sway for decades. Canada and Portugal's decision to abandon the F-35 is just the latest evidence that America's allies no longer trust Washington to act in their best interests. Trump's tariffs, his threats to NATO, and his transactional approach to diplomacy have all contributed to a growing perception that the United States under his leadership is untrustworthy and self-serving. The world is adapting to this new reality by reducing its dependence on Washington. In the long run, this shift could be disastrous for America's global influence. If even loyal allies like Canada are willing to distance themselves from U.S. economic and military dominance, Washington could find itself increasingly isolated. Canada and Portugal's F-35 abandonment is more than just a military procurement decision. It's a clear sign of America's waning global influence under Trump. As allies seek strategic independence, Washington risks losing its dominant position. If this trend continues, Trump's America First policy could leave the United States more isolated than ever. President Donald Trump once again became the center of controversy when he spoke, calling Canada the 51st state of the United States.
And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states.
This statement not only angered the Canadian government, but also aroused public opinion at home and abroad. Many people questioned whether this was just a joke or a sign of a more serious diplomatic problem. In a speech at a campaign event in South Carolina, Trump suddenly mentioned Canada and called the country the 51st state of the United States. This statement quickly attracted the attention of the media and the public. Specifically, Trump said, "We have a very special relationship with Canada, a place I have always considered America's 51st state. They depend on us more than they think." Although Trump's tone seemed joking, This statement touched the national pride of Canadians. It also evokes long-standing controversies about the relationship between the two countries, especially in economic, defense, and sovereignty issues. The context of this statement is also particularly noteworthy. In recent times, the United States and Canada have had many disagreements over trade policy, energy issues, and military cooperation. Trump's comments made many people question his true views on Canada and whether, if re-elected, he would change his policy towards the neighboring country. Immediately after Trump's statement spread in the media, the Canadian government quickly spoke out against it. Prime Minister Mark Carney, in a press conference, made a tough statement. "Canada is an independent, sovereign country, and we are not part of any other country." Such statements do not reflect reality and do not help the bilateral relationship. In addition to Mark Carney, many senior Canadian officials also expressed dissatisfaction. Canada's foreign minister called this a disrespectful statement, while some Canadian parliamentarians even called on the government to take stronger diplomatic measures in response. Canadian public opinion also reacted violently. On social media platforms, #CanadaIsNotAstate quickly became trendy. Many people expressed outrage at Trump's disregard for their national sovereignty. Some analysts say that although Trump may have been joking, such statements could damage relations between the two countries in the long term. In the U.S., former President Donald Trump's statement about considering Canada the 51st state caused many mixed reactions. Trump's supporters, especially populists, claim that he is just joking and that the media is exaggerating the problem. Some people even agree with the view that Canada is highly dependent on the United States for its economy and security. However, many politicians, including Republican members, express concern that this statement could negatively affect U.S.-Canada relations. They emphasize that Canada is one of America's closest allies, and such reckless words could undermine cooperation between the two countries. Former U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, asserted during the hearing that Canada is a sovereign country, reflecting the difference between his view and Trump's statement. Reaction from the international community also shows concern about Trump's statements. At the G7 conference in La Malbaie, Canada, top diplomats from Germany and the European Union expressed solidarity with Canada, opposing the merger idea proposed by Trump. These reactions show that, while some may view Trump's comments as a joke, many others are concerned about the potential negative impact on diplomatic relations and international cooperation. Internationally, many allied countries such as Britain, France, and Germany have expressed concern about former President Donald Trump's statement when he called Canada the 51st state of the United States. European leaders believe that such statements could destabilize international relations and lead to unnecessary tensions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz emphasized that the principle of border inviolability applies to every country, no matter how powerful it is. He also noted that Mr. Trump's statements had caused considerable misunderstanding among European Union leaders. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot affirmed that Greenland is a European territory and the EU will not let any country violate its sovereignty. French government spokeswoman Sophie Primas warned of a form of imperialism in Mr. Trump's statements. The international press also widely reported on this event. Major news agencies such as the BBC analyzed that this could be a sign that Mr. Trump, if re-elected, will continue to pursue a tough foreign policy, sometimes without regard to the diplomatic impact. These reactions show that the international community is closely watching and concerned about statements that could affect global stability and cooperation. Although the relationship between the U.S. and Canada has traditionally been strong, recent statements by former President Donald Trump suggesting that Canada become the 51st state have raised concerns about potential impacts on bilateral relations. Such remarks can erode trust between the two nations, leading to increased caution in future negotiations, particularly in areas like trade and military cooperation. Analysts suggest that these comments may prompt Canadian officials to adopt a more guarded approach in upcoming discussions with the U.S. The perception of a dismissive attitude toward Canada's sovereignty could result in heightened scrutiny and a re-evaluation of collaborative efforts, especially in critical sectors such as defense and commerce. For instance, in response to perceived threats, Canada has sought to diversify its defense partnerships. A notable example is Canada's recent agreement to purchase the Jindalee Over-the-Horizon Radar (JORN) system from Australia, a move aimed at enhancing Arctic security and reducing reliance on U.S. military technology. In the trade arena, tensions have led to a surge in Canadian nationalism, with consumers increasingly favoring domestically produced goods. This shift has been accompanied by a significant rise in complaints about mislabeling as businesses attempt to capitalize on the Made in Canada sentiment. These developments underscore the potential long-term consequences of rhetoric that undermines the sovereignty of allied nations. While the foundational ties between the U.S. and Canada remain robust, maintaining mutual respect and trust is crucial for the continued success of their partnership. Former President Donald Trump's recent suggestion that Canada should become the 51st state has ignited significant debate within the United States, particularly as the 2024 presidential election approaches. Democratic leaders swiftly criticized the remark, viewing it as another instance of Trump's approach potentially undermining relationships with key allies. They argue that such statements could weaken diplomatic ties and harm the United States standing on the global stage. Notably, some Republican figures have also expressed reservations. They are concerned that such rhetoric might alienate moderate voters who prioritize stable international partnerships and diplomatic decorum. This apprehension stems from the potential electoral ramifications, as maintaining support from centrist constituents is crucial for success in closely contested regions. The controversy surrounding Trump's comments underscores the delicate balance candidates must strike in addressing foreign policy issues during the campaign. While appealing to certain voter bases, they must also consider the broader implications of their statements on international relations and domestic political dynamics. As the election nears, both parties are likely to scrutinize and respond to such remarks, aiming to position themselves favorably in the eyes of the electorate. Trump is famous for his shocking statements, but this time, it seems he has pushed things too far. While his supporters still defend him, Trump's image in international politics could be seriously affected. Many people question whether he truly understands the importance of alliances. Calling Canada the 51st state is not merely a joke but also carries serious diplomatic implications. The Canadian government reacted strongly, public opinion in both countries rose, and even American politicians appeared worried about the impact of this statement. Although this may be just one in a series of controversial statements by Trump, it still raises big questions about how he views America's traditional allies. If Trump is re-elected, will he continue to make moves that will make U.S.-Canada relations more tense? Or is this just a temporary storm in a volatile political context? Time will tell.